Hi everyone, this is Shelly and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. I'm back with another Question the Narrative video, and the topic today is Pennsylvania cryptids. I stand corrected. A couple of weeks ago, I did a video with Donita Fogelman from Prairie Dust on Oklahoma cryptids. And in that video, I was kind of complaining about the fact that I live in Pennsylvania and it doesn't seem to have anything interesting in it like Oklahoma does. And someone commented and said to me, there are tons of cryptids in Pennsylvania. You just need to look at it. So I did, and I am so glad that I did. So I'm going to share some of those with you today, and I'm also going to share some anecdotes of my own that I have, and I haven't had any like 100% experiences with them, but I do have some pretty comical and sometimes interesting stories about some of these specific animals that we're going to be talking about today. But you know, the whole question is, what exactly are cryptids? We know that it means hidden animals or animals that are not in the place where they typically would be. And a lot of people think that all cryptids are probably not even real. But let's not forget that the mountain gorilla was considered to be a cryptid for a very long time, until it was actually discovered to be a real animal. And if you even think of the sorts of animals that we even know about, I mean, we always think of cryptids as being these fantastical creatures. And we have so many of them that we actually do know about, like the oarfish. To me, that certainly looks like something that people would call a sea serpent. Yet it is something that we know about, so it's not called a cryptid, but it certainly looks like something that you would consider to, or that you would think to be studying in cryptozoology, right? And so, you know, that's the question. What exactly are cryptids? Well, I think that some of them are not hidden animals, hybrids. You know, I'm thinking that some of the cryptids that we're going to be talking about today could very well be hybrids. They're spoken of in the book of Enoch, and in fact there are seemingly some hybrids even mentioned in the Bible, at least if you take it that way. And we do really have some interesting creatures now though, so some of them could just be unexplained animal species that we don't know about. And since we don't know about them, you know, we kind of think that they're a little bit freaky, but we do have some freaky animals of our own that we already, you know, have discovered. I mean, just up until a few years ago, I had never even heard of a pangolin, which is this creature here. And they're amazing. They're actually now my second favorite animal. My first favorite is a sloth, which I also just showed here because they do look a little bit different. But the pangolin is also something that, yeah, would have jumped right out of the pages of like a storybook to me, but it is actually a real animal. And let's not forget the kangaroo. I mean, if anything looks like it could be some sort of strange hybrid, a kangaroo certainly looks that way, especially when you look at their biceps. They're actually quite scary. They're not the cute little kangaroos from Winnie the Pooh, that's for sure. But anyway, let's get started on some of these animals that I have found out, or maybe I already knew that they were here. So actually, yeah, we're going to start with Bigfoot. Growing up, Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster were always my favorite cryptids. So I was always scouring the internet looking for sightings of Bigfoot in Pennsylvania. And I was really excited to find that back in 2014, there was actually a sighting right around where I live. And so let's just read a little bit about this. It said, observed. This happened January 13th, 2014. First sighting at 1930 and seen in pond reeds, 1950. Because of footprints found in yard, I bought a 1,000,000 candle power spotlight. At 1930, I went on back porch and about 300 yards down an incline, I shined it in a field and got red eye shine. As soon as I hit it with the light, it stopped like, uh-oh, I just got made. The eyes looked up towards light for 3 seconds, lost eye shine, looked back up and was thinking what to do. Then it moved fast towards my light and I got scared and went back in house. Told my father-in-law. We went out and used 2 spotlights in the direction. I could not see anything. We both got in my SUV and drove to the fields where I saw eye shine and pulled off a side dirt road. Got out and hit light into reeds by pond and I picked up its eye shine up high in the reeds. Then my father-in-law got him with his spotlight. It was looking, and then it went low to the ground and was going from left to the right in a small creek embankment, and would look and then move and then would stop and look long enough where we could see its eyes blink. Could not see any body because of distance, only eye shine. Have video of encounter, but only got 1 minute because iPhone stopped recording due to no more memory for recording. Isn't that amazing how that always seems to happen when it comes to these creatures? Anyway, I was more worried about not losing sight of its location. Next day we went to the spot, and the reeds were 10 foot tall, and the eye shine was about 7.5 to 8 foot range. Ground was frozen in some spots and spongy grass in others, meaning step down and grass comes back up. 1 track found and have picture. I bought the spotlight and was purposely looking for the thing that left its prints in my yard 5 nights before this. I now have night vision with capability to record, and I am keeping my video camera charged to get this on video. Believe this is hanging around for food at the pond. And it says, I have been told this area is a hot spot, which I have not heard of any stories other than this one. And again, I do live pretty close to this area. And then there was a follow-up investigation. And they just basically backed up what he said about where the eye shine was and how high the reeds were and everything. And it does point out that this is right near the Appalachian chain. And yes, it is. I'm often on the Appalachian Trail. And so the area where I'm at, I don't see a lot of coverage, like tree coverage. But according to this, the area where this specifically was on that part of the Appalachian Train, there is a lot of the coverage. So I was really excited to find that out. And then there are other stories of Bigfoot too. This one is, let's see, in Regalsville. So it says, the scream in the night was loud, long, and terrifying. It penetrated, went right through me, said Greg Stokes, who heard the scream while camping with his girlfriend in Pike County, Pennsylvania in July 1984. And then down here it says, I'm 99% sure it was Bigfoot, and I leave the 1% of doubt only because I didn't actually see it. And yeah, so that is something that happens with the stories. A lot of times it's just heard but not seen. And it says here that scream was life-changing. Over the July 4th, 1984 holiday, he and his girlfriend went camping in a remote valley along the Delaware River, about 50 miles north of Regalsville. I was not drinking or doing drugs. I was in the military at the time, he said. An experienced camper and hunter, he made a campfire, cooked dinner, and then turned in for the evening. About 9:45, when it was good and dark, something walked up on our campsite, he said. It was definitely something on 2 feet, and I could hear it snapping sticks as it walked. It seemed unlikely that it was a person. The place in which they camped was in the area of the ill-fated Tox Island Dam, a flood control project abandoned by the feds in the 1950s, but only after it was cleared of people and buildings. There's nothing in the valley, nothing human, Stokes said. He stayed put inside the tent, a hatchet and fillet knife ready. When the noises stopped, he uneasily lay on his sleeping bag. 10 minutes later came the scream. This animal let out a scream that was just the most terrifying thing you can imagine. This creature, this thing, was so close to our tent that I could hear its lips pop open when it started to scream. It had a terribly deep guttural tone, but also this high-pitched tone, and the scream went on for 20 or 25 seconds. I didn't think then, and I don't think now, that a human being is capable of making that sound. This scream was definitely territorial, and it was definitely directed at us. And the thing that really stands out in my mind is even 37 years later was the resonance this thing produced. It shook my body so hard I couldn't see the inside of the tent. It was like looking through shimmering water. The sound went all the way through me. If you stand in front of a big bass amplifier at a concert, that's what it was like. He's convinced the vibration was infrasound, a sound wave beyond what humans can hear. Whales, elephants, and giraffes use infrasound to communicate over long distances. But the combo of the high and low pitches with the vibrations was frightening. And then he says, he stoked the campfire until it blazed and did not get any sleep. At daylight, he searched the area for about 45 minutes, but he did not find any footprints. So those are just two of the sightings that were reported in Pennsylvania of Bigfoot. But let's move on to another creature now. Next, we have the thunderbird. And the thunderbird is a bird that, or I should say a creature that I know was reported in Western Pennsylvania. I had heard of the reports in Western Pennsylvania. But as I read on, it actually reminds me of something that happened back when my husband and I and some of our children used to live in York County, which I will recount in just a minute. But let's just read what it tells us about the thunderbird. If you're into cryptozoology, the study of unknown mystery creatures, the Pennsylvania wilds is a good place to visit. The forests are packed with Bigfoot sightings, and there are water monsters too, such as the Susquehanna seal said to inhabit the West Branch Susquehanna. And if you happen to be looking for this sort of thing, make sure you also look up. There have been sightings of thunderbirds too. Thunderbirds are a legend going back to the Native Americans. These oversized birds were said to hide out in the forest, and if one was spotted, it meant there was a storm on the way. Over the last 100 years or so, there have still been sightings along the I-80 frontier, Pine Creek Valley, dark skies, and elk country landscapes of the Pennsylvania wilds. Robert Lyman's book, Amazing Indeed, lists several of these. Going back as far as the 1800s, the book even shows a thunderbird on the cover. A woman named Elvira Coates remembered hearing tales of the thunderbirds from the local Native Americans who lived in Potter County when she was a girl. Another witness, Lewis Sheldon, was an early pioneer of Potter County. He claimed to have seen flocks of 5 or 6 thunderbirds at a time. In 1892, a man named Fred Murray reported seeing a flock near Dent's Run in Cameron County. He described them as being like buzzards, but much larger with 16-foot wingspans. And in the mid-1900s, a thunderbird that was compared to the size of a plane was seen near Jersey Shore, Lycoming County. In more recent times, thunderbirds have been spotted in Clinton County. In the summer of 2010, a large bird with a very long beak was seen near the Coudersport Pike, north of Lock Haven, by 2 witnesses. A subsequent investigation turned up no further sightings. In June of 2012, 2 girls saw a thunderbird while camping in Chapman Township. The bird, which was estimated at a 14-foot wingspan and had no feathers on its head, swooped low over the camp, causing the younger girl to run crying into the cabin. "I know people think I'm strange when I talk about it," said the older girl, "but it was real." The biggest champion of the thunderbirds was Hiram Cranmer, a retired postmaster who lived in Leidy Township. Cranmer was a sort of connoisseur of the weird, often discussing ghosts, UFOs, and monsters. He claimed to have seen his first thunderbird in 1922 and 4 others after that. They had a tendency to inhabit northern Clinton County and southern Potter County, which, to be fair, is a pretty remote area. A large flock of thunderbirds could be pretty easily hiding up there. Once there was even said to have been a photo of a thunderbird. According to the story, some men managed to kill one, nail it to a barn, and take a black and white photo while they posed in front of it. The photo, now missing, has become known as the Lost Thunderbird photo, and is itself a story of legend. It may have ended with Cranmer. Researcher Ivan Sanderson claimed to have left the photo with Cranmer when he visited in 1963. Cranmer died when his house burned down in 1967, possibly taking the Thunderbird photo with it. In Lyman's book, he hints at this as well, mentioning that the photo burned in a home. If you go looking for thunderbirds, visit the site and interview any recent witnesses. And then it just tells you what to do if you are going to be going to look for a thunderbird. Now, there is much speculation that thunderbirds could actually be living pteranodons. And connected to that, there are also many who believe that these pteranodon sightings could also be what some people are thinking are possibly dragons in the sky. And you can certainly see a resemblance between them and a thunderbird, and this creature here and a dragon. Now, I do have to say that I did mention this in the other video about the Oklahoma cryptids, is that probably about 7 or 8 years ago, my 2 oldest daughters went for a walk, and they both insist that they saw a dragon. in the sky. Now they were probably about 17 and 14 and 15 years old. And I will say that my daughters, especially my older daughter, she's not one who likes to call attention to herself. She's very matter of fact, kind of just isn't one prone to flights of fancy, so to speak. But they both insisted there was a dragon in the sky. It had a long nose, just like this, and they said that it had a long, skinny tail. And so I was asking them, do you think that it could have been a heron or a crane, when they fly with their legs kind of back behind them, that might have looked like a skinny tail. And I was showing them pictures and they insisted, no, that is not what we saw. So that in itself is extremely interesting. Another thing that these thunderbirds remind me of is when my husband and I, we lived in York County we didn't live there very long. We wanted to get out of the city, but it ended up being too far away from things. But my husband's family has a homestead around there, and we were visiting at his uncle's, and my children were going to go swimming in his swimming hole on his property, and he just nonchalantly said that we need to watch out because there are really, really big birds around there. And he called them crane birds. But he said, watch out for the crane birds. He said, because I'm not kidding you. He said they could pick a small child up. And he just said this like it was nothing. And I looked at my husband and I was like, is he crazy? But no, he was dead serious. And he told us we needed to just keep an eye on our children because there were these huge birds that could possibly swoop down and pick them up. And so I'm wondering, could that possibly have also been thunderbirds that he was talking about? And maybe he was just so used to seeing them that he didn't realize that it wasn't something that had actually been, quote, discovered yet. So this next one I had never heard of in Pennsylvania. I had heard of something similar in some southern and midwestern states. I believe that Donita even mentioned something that sounds a lot like this. But apparently there is also a sheep man. Specifically, it's called the Waterford sheep man. So in this story that tells about the Waterford sheep man, there is someone who had planned on just doing photography and was there to photograph an old bridge. And this is what happened while he was there, he said. As I stood studying the covered bridge, I could hear something crashing through the undergrowth off to my right. My first thought was I had spooked a bear when I pulled into the parking lot. I stared in the direction of the noises, curious to know what I was hearing, and quickly realized whatever it was getting closer to me, not running away. I kept the vehicle between me and the approaching noise, ready to step back into the vehicle if a bear appeared from the undergrowth. Suddenly, two beings stumbled out into the clearing and stopped in their tracks. They were far from being cryptids, but two boys, who were both in their late teens, possibly early 20s, covered head to toe in mud and slime. They were obviously surprised by my presence, and I was by theirs. I was not going to ask what they were doing wandering around the swampy area when Daryl, the taller of the two, spoke. "Dude, are you here researching for the goat man?" I just stared, unsure of how to respond. "Man, of course he's here for the goat man," Chad laughed as he slapped Daryl on the arm. "Why else would he be here with equipment? Probably going to do some fancy test or two to find it." I wasn't about to explain to them the only thing I had was a camera, and I had only planned on photographing the bridge, but the duo definitely had my attention. Part of me wanted to get back in the vehicle and leave, but part of me was curious about what they were talking about. When I looked up the Waterford covered bridge, I definitely did not recall reading anything about a goat man. "Goat man?" I asked before I even realized I had spoken. The two of them stared at me as if I was speaking a foreign language. "Dude, you don't know about the goat man?" Daryl asked, causing them to start laughing at my ignorance of the subject. Chad added a goat noise, which caused them to laugh even harder. "He lives under the bridge," Daryl continued once they stopped laughing. "If you come here at night, you'll more than likely see him." Now, I've got to add here that Donita also said that the goat man in Oklahoma also lives under a bridge. And I don't know if you remember, she happened to mention was it a folk tale? The Three Billy Goats Gruff. And yes, in Oklahoma, they live under a bridge. The story that I had heard of another, it was either a sheep man or a goat man. A lot of times the names are interchangeable. Same thing. I'm pretty sure it was along the Appalachian Mountain Trail, somewhere farther south than me though. And they had also spoken of a sheep man that lived by a bridge and that lots of bad stuff happened on that bridge that was attributed to that sheep man. So here we see again that they're talking about this creature that lives under the bridge. So I'm just going to continue. Eric said that he saw it once, Chad added. He said it was tall and hairy. It had a goat's head with horns and hooves. Dude, Eric was drunk, so you can't believe anything, he says, Daryl protested. Besides, he saw a chupacabra, not the goat man. Everybody knows the goat man is half human and half goat. So what kind of tests are you going to run? Chad asked in a serious tone as he stared at me. I'm just here to take a couple pictures of the bridge, I answered. But if you see it, are you going to take pictures of it, ain't you? Chad demanded of me. Sure, I muttered. If I see it, I'll take a picture of it. Cool, man, Chad responded. They seemed happy with the answer and went to the far side of the parking lot and plopped down on the ground to watch me. I could hear them whispering back and forth before bursting out in fits of laughter. Just a little further down, it says, I have to admit that I had first thought the two boys were playing a joke on me when they were telling me about the goat man. I was surprised to discover when I returned home the strange creature is part of regional lore. While they called the creature the goat man, local legend more commonly calls it the sheep man. The story seems to have its origin in the late 1960s, early 1970s, when people began reporting sightings of a large hairy creature covered in either gray or black hair with glowing red eyes. The creature had a goat-like head complete with horns, long arms with clawed hands, and hooves like a goat for feet. Note, whether their friend Eric saw or imagined the creature, his description was really close to the description of the creature seen in the 1970s. By the mid-1970s, everybody was seeing the strange creature roaming the forests and fields around Waterford. Despite the name, the sheep man was not a friendly beast. Farmers during the height of the sightings reported their livestock being savagely torn apart and eaten by this strange creature. The sheep man supposedly lived in a cave northwest of town, but was often spotted lurking around the covered bridge on the southeast side of town. After a massive wave of sightings by residents in the mid-1970s, the creature seemed to have vanished from the local landscape, though every now and then it seems to make an appearance before disappearing again. What was Waterford's mysterious creature? Was it a sheep man, like so many people claimed? Reading through the handful of reports regarding the sheep man, they are very similar to two different urban legends that morphed into one. The first is the story about the boogeyman. The story told by parents to their kids is to encourage them to behave. What about the witnesses who maintained they saw the sheep man? One explanation is misidentification. I think that it would be hard to see something that has the head of a goat and is the size of a man. But you never know. So I will leave a link in the description box to this because this is just, I think, actually, no, there is more here because there's other notes now. All right. Notes on other goatmen, sheepmen. Looking into the handful of other goatmen legends around the United States, I find it interesting that the majority of these legends start within the early 1970s. The most famous of these monsters came out of Prince George County, Maryland, with sightings in the early 1970s. Only one of these legends seems to be pre-1970s, and that is the story of the Louisville, Kentucky goatman, which first appears in the late 1950s. I have to wonder why there was a sudden influx of these stories, but have not been able to discover a satisfying answer to this phenomenon. I'm going to interject here. Is it possible there was some sort of portal that opened? You know, a lot of people believe that these creatures live, well, obviously in a different realm, but almost on a different, some people call it vibration, that they live in a lower vibration than we do, and that they are sometimes able to come into our realm. And that's just one idea. And others also say that they actually, I think that they live in a different infrared spectrum. Obviously, these are not my ideas. I'm just trying to share with you what other people have said, and that they are at a different light level, so we are not always able to see them. But anyway, all of the Goatman stories have the creature killing dogs, livestock, and in some cases human. Even the Waterford creature supposedly killed a person, though I have found no definite source, just a mention in a friend of a friend story. I have not found any verified deaths that come directly from a Goatman attack. Only the Louisville, Kentucky legend has recorded deaths linked to it, but those are not a result of an attack by an unknown creature. The Louisville Goatman legend states that for the creature to appear, one has to walk across a high railroad bridge that is still active. People have died from jumping from the bridge to escape the oncoming train or dying after being hit by a train. Waterford was not the only place in Pennsylvania to have sightings of a Goatman roaming the fields of the state. In 1973, two farmers in Lancaster County spotted a man-like creature covered in gray hair and having a white mane grab a chicken and run off with it. The creature had long fangs, a wolf-like head with two horns protruding from it, and long arms with sharp claws. Other sightings of Goatman have probably been reported, but I have not been able to verify these. As I continue my research, maybe more Goatman encounters will be located. So, yeah, I was actually surprised about this one because I had never heard of a Goatman or a sheepman, whatever you want to call him, in Pennsylvania. Next, I came across some articles which are claiming that there are werewolves in Pennsylvania. And I have to admit that I had a simultaneous feeling of delight and dismay when I heard about this, because who would really want a werewolf to be living anywhere around them? But let's just take a look at what this one has to say. So this one is called Ghosts of the Pennsylvania Wilds, Werewolves in Cook County. In the 1940s, there were sightings of an odd monster in the Cook Forest in the ancient landscape of the Pennsylvania wilds. The few witnesses who saw it described it as hairy and very quick, disappearing into the trees after one quick glimpse. As nobody could ever get much of a sighting, let alone an explanation, the creature came to be known as the Clarion What Is It? Nobody ever figured out what it was, and the creature doesn't seem to be sighted anymore. But one explanation that nobody ever really considered was that it might be a werewolf. According to an old legend, it's possible. So I'm just going to summarize this story right here rather than reading the entire thing. So there was a teenager, a late teenager, probably about 19 years old, named Elizabeth, who had a boyfriend who was much older than her, and it was rumored that he was a werewolf. And they would often sit and just watch over the family sheep, and none of the sheep were ever attacked by wolves. And at that time, there were lots of wolf attacks on sheep, but their family's sheep never were attacked, and a lot of people thought that it had to do with the fact that she was dating this man who was rumored to be a werewolf. So now I'm just going to start reading right here. It says, one night, one of the local men shot a wolf that he saw, hoping to collect the reward. And again, the reason that they're shooting the wolves was because there were all these attacks on sheep, and there were farmers who were offering rewards for dead wolves. So that's why they went out to do this. They were hoping to collect the reward. Then it says, it was described as bigger than usual and old looking. It was wounded and staggered off into the forest. The next morning, he went looking for it. The story said the man went to find the wolf for the $25 reward, tracking it by the blood. He didn't find a wolf, not exactly. He found Elizabeth's old boyfriend lying dead. Lying on his back, shot through the heart, said the story. It was noticed that his teeth were long and yellow like a wolf's, and that there were stiff hairs on the underside of his hands and on the soles of his feet. The man was buried where he'd fallen, and even though he was dead, Elizabeth and her family seemed to get a sort of residual protection from the local wolf packs. It appears that the wolves felt a kind of loyalty, as Elizabeth's family never lost a sheep to the wolves again. Elizabeth Paul was not a fictional person. Her family appears in property records from the area. Records show that she was born about 1811. As she grew up, Elizabeth got married and moved to Clarion County about 1850. She died there in 1905 and was buried near Cook Forest. Her grave may still be getting some special protection from the local werewolf population. To this day, reports of upright canines are noted in the area. Maybe the werewolves are still checking in on Elizabeth's grave. maybe Clarion County, has its own tribe of werewolves protecting a grave forever. Now, I just want to share an anecdotal story that I have about werewolves, and I thankfully never saw one, but I grew up on a street in Pennsylvania that it was called Constitution Drive. Well, it still is called Constitution Drive. And some of you who are familiar with Pennsylvania may have heard of it. It's just notorious for all kinds of spooky stories that they say happen down there. And nothing ever happened to me when I grew up down there, and I lived down there for, well, until I was in my late teens, early 20s. There was, however, one of the stories that was told was that there were werewolves down on this street. And since it was a no-outlet street, it was a place where lots of teenagers, especially teenage couples, would go, and they would go down there and they would park because it was heavily wooded, secluded, and do what teenagers do. And my brother is 18 years older than I am, and about 15, 20 years ago, he told me that he and his best friend used to go down when people were parked down there, and they would put on werewolf masks, and they would jump on the cars and they would scare the people to get them to leave. And this would have been, I'm pretty sure this was before I was born. So this would have been like in the 70s that they were doing this. So I'm fairly certain that the werewolf stories, at least that have to do with that street, are likely because of my brother and his friend. But I just wanted to share that because that just shows what kind of family I grew up in. A whole lot of fun. Similarly to that, Pennsylvania also has reports of the dogman. And this is another cryptid that Pennsylvania has in common with Oklahoma. We were talking much about the dogman in my video that I did with Donita Fogelman. And lo and behold, yes, there are actually stories and reports of the dogman in Pennsylvania too. There's even a map here that shows you, let me see if I can get it. Yep. I think this is zoomed in a bit, but there's actually a map here that will show you all of the places that the dogman was reported in Pennsylvania. And I believe that there are 34 of them. And I'm not going to read through all of them, but just to give you some idea of the sorts of reports, let's go up to the top. Bipedal canine eating roadkill. 8 to 10 foot tall bipedal canine manifests. And that goes into, just the idea, is it possible that these things are sort of living on a different infrared light band than we are, or possibly a different vibration, a different frequency that a lot of people will bring up, and that's possible why they do seem to manifest, why we can never get good pictures of them. It's a possibility. So we also have 8 foot tall bipedal wolf, 9 foot tall upright lichen, aggressive 8 foot tall bipedal canine, huge canine quadruped crosses the road, cow size hyena-like canine, massive bipedal cryptid canine tracked and killed. I believe that was by coyote hunters. Let me see. Let's click on that one and see what this one has to say. It said a Northeast Pennsylvania man recalls a bizarre incident with a massive bipedal cryptid canine. It had killed several guard dogs and was supposedly tracked and killed by state police. Now, I do have to say that a lot of people do conflate werewolves and dogmen, but apparently they are two very different creatures. And while if you read this and that they are attacking guard dogs, the werewolves themselves do seem to be much more vicious than the dogman. Although again, according to this, they're not completely innocent. But anyway, I recently received the following account. I was recently told by a friend that you investigate strange canine sightings in Pennsylvania. I live in the northeastern part of the state in rural Monroe County in the Poconos. I have a bipedal wolf account. This occurred on September 3rd, 1975. I now own the property and still live there. My father and I were traveling in our family station wagon on a dirt road on our property. When we first saw this creature, it had come out of heavy woods and crossed the road while on all fours. We stopped the car and watched it. When it reached the north boundary of our field, it stood up on its hind legs. It tried to hide between two mulberry trees. Its head touched a branch that was approximately 12 feet off the ground. My father would later measure its height. It then ran south, dropping down on all fours. It was running at an unbelievable speed. It covered 100 plus yards and ran out of the southern boundary of our field into the road directly in front of us. From its nose to the tip of its tail, it covered the county road from shoulder to shoulder, approximately 18 feet. Its left shoulder was about 1 foot above the center of the hood of our car. When measured, it was 3 feet off the ground, putting its left shoulder at approximately 4 feet tall. As it ran in front of us crossing the road, it turned its head toward us and snarled, showing all of its teeth, including the canines that were at least 6 inches long. It had huge amber eyes and just looked plain evil. The neighbor who owned the woods where the creature had come out of had about 12 guard dogs. He lived alone, we called him Mr. Hermit, and owned about 100 acres, which included several long retired slate quarry holes that were all filled with clear blue water and huge fish. The woods were also full of deer. By the way, our newly built home was about 50 yards west of where it ran south across the road. A few nights after this incident, at about 1 a.m. in the morning, all hell broke loose. We could hear the neighbors' guard dogs fighting, madly yelping and being slaughtered. Mr. Hermit opened up with a 12 gauge and kept firing. We would find out later that 9 of his 12 guard dogs were killed. Our area was under Pennsylvania State Police jurisdiction. There was no local sheriff or police force. Several troopers showed up that night. Then at daybreak, a tactical team arrived in a helicopter which landed in our field. My father worked the 3rd shift at the time at Ingersoll Rand and was just getting home. My father immediately walked up to Mr. Hermit's property. He crossed our fields and then directly up his driveway. The state police refused to let him go any further. My mother was so scared of the ordeal that we had heard the previous night, so she decided to keep us home from school. Shortly after I saw my father disappear at Mr. Hermit's driveway, small arms fire erupted. We're all looking out our kitchen window in anticipation of the results. The state police helicopter took off and hovered over Mr. Hermit's property. It then dipped very low and then lifted something huge wrapped in a tarp with a cargo net around it. My father soon returned and told us that the state police told him that he was to forget about what he saw. The barracks commander stopped in on his way out to reinforce this. We pestered my father to tell us what it was they shot and killed. This was the only time I had ever seen fear in his eyes. All he said was that he saw them shoot and kill an extremely large wolf. He never spoke of the incident again, nor would he acknowledge my inquiries about it. I eavesdropped on him and my mother talking about it after we kids were supposed to be asleep. He said there were 9 dead guard dogs and that 12-gauge shotgun shells were everywhere. By the next night, there was a loaded 12-gauge shotgun at every entrance door with double-aught buckshot. My mom had a new handgun at the ready. My father got off the night shift very soon after this incident. There have been no other incidences with bipedal wolves in our area. And it says, note, I informed the witness that the Pocono area is still well known for bipedal cryptid canine sightings. I have reported several over the past decade. I'm laughing because as of right now, my 18-year-old daughter is camping in the Poconos tonight. So that's why I'm laughing, kind of because I'm a little horrified about that. Yet another cryptid that I have never heard of at all, ever, not just in Pennsylvania, but that apparently lives here, is the albatwitch. The albatwitch is a legendary creature said to inhabit the forests of south-central Pennsylvania, particularly around the area of Chickies Rock in Lancaster County. Described as a small humanoid creature standing around 4 feet tall, the albatwitch is said to resemble a miniature version of Bigfoot or Sasquatch. So just from listening to its description so far, it sounds a lot like the orang pendek. I believe that is in Indonesia. I could be wrong. While sightings of the albatwitch are rare and largely anecdotal, the creature has become a part of local folklore in the region, with various stories and accounts passed down through generations. And so this just tells you a lot about it. Its height, the albatwitch is generally described as being small, typically around 4 feet tall, making it significantly smaller than the typical depiction of Bigfoot or Sasquatch. My question is, could it also just be, like a juvenile Sasquatch? That's also an idea. The build. It is often described as having a humanoid build with arms, legs, and a torso resembling those of a human, albeit on a smaller scale. Covering. Reports regarding the creature's covering or fur are inconsistent. Some accounts suggest that it has shaggy hair or fur covering its body, while others describe it as having smooth or rough skin. Coloration. The coloration of the albatwitch's hair or skin is also subject to variation. Facial features. While details regarding facial features can be scarce, eyewitnesses have reported that the albatwitch possesses human-like facial characteristics, including eyes, a nose, and a mouth. The origin of the albatwitch legend can be traced back to the folklore of south-central Pennsylvania, particularly around the area of Chickies Rock in Lancaster County. The name albatwitch itself is believed to have its root in Pennsylvania Dutch culture, combining the German words alb, meaning elf, and zwerg, meaning dwarf. That's very interesting because I've done a video before where the elven bloodline is said to actually be just another name for the Nephilim bloodline, and this is being connected to elves, at least according to the Pennsylvania Dutch language. And there's the idea that they were possibly hybrids of the Nephilim or of the Watchers. In the case of the albatwitch, it is often portrayed as a mischievous creature known for throwing stones at people, stealing apples from orchards, and engaging in other playful or disruptive behavior. So just thinking of that too, just engaging in playful or disruptive behavior, stealing apples, it sounds very juvenile to me. So is that possible what it could be? I think this is funny here because it says powers and abilities, stealth and elusiveness. When I was skimming over this kind of makes it look like it's part of a game because it has like powers and abilities, stealth and elusiveness, agility and speed, throwing ability, night vision. It's just something that I would expect to see on like a game that children would play, maybe like a role-playing game or something. But anyway, so that is the albatwitch. The last one that I'm going to be sharing with you is one that I was super excited to find out about, and one that I would actually like to go visit this area sometime just to look for it, because it is a lake monster. And you remember I told you that Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster had always been my favorites when I was growing up. And I at one point talked about the one in Lake Champlain, Champ. So I talked about that and wanting to go up there to visit Lake Champlain, and here we have one right in Pennsylvania, and its name is Raystown Ray. For decades, there have been sightings of a creature in Huntingdon County, Pennsylvania's Raystown Lake. Old photos show a large, shadowy figure just below the surface. Boaters describe sudden water turbulence and strange appearances of a large water creature, which locals have dubbed Raystown Ray. The first known photograph of Raystown Ray, photographed by a local fisherman looking over the lake from the Huntingdon Company. And so we have one here. And this one, I wonder if you can click on these. Oh, it's not letting me do more than that. So we have this one here, the shadow underneath, and then we certainly have what looks to be very much like a plesiosaur. And I do have a little bit of a bigger image, and you can see it right here. Looks very much like some of the others that we see of lake monsters. We've known it's been in there a while now, admitted managing director of Raystown Lake, Dwight Beal, when he was asked his thoughts on this astonishing discovery. It's a private creature, but it comes out around this time of year, April. Call it Raystown's own Punxsutawney Phil. In 2006, when asked his professional opinion, Jeff Krause, wildlife biologist at Raystown Lake, submitted the following statement in writing. I believe it must be a vegetarian. We have not seen any evidence of this animal taking fish, geese, otters, or ducks. So I would suggest that our swimmers and boaters are very safe. It appears this animal's habits are similar to manatees, which are completely herbivorous and gentle. The increase of weed beds around the lake is probably providing more food in the shallows for herbivores, and that would increase the sightings. So right here in Raystown, there is a Nessie-like creature. It looks like a very plesiosaur type creature. So anyway, I was excited to share all of these with you because I was kind of bummed out listening to all of the stories that Donita had about Oklahoma, and here I am living in Pennsylvania, and it has a much richer cryptid history than I ever suspected. And maybe it's time that you take a look around your own state too, because I'm fairly certain that there are lots of really great tales all over. That's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one either here or over on Instagram. And if you like my work and would like to check out my YouTube membership, I will leave a link in the description box for that, or you can just click on it right on my channel page. And I hope you have a great day.